death, war, depression. Those were the realities when Edgar Cayce first revealed something that startled everyone who listened. He claimed that within every human being existed the same consciousness that animated Jesus of Nazareth. Not a metaphor, not poetic language, a living reality. In one of his most impactful readings in 1932, given in Virginia Beach, he declared that Christ was not locked away in heaven, but planted in the human heart as a seed of light. The Christ is the pattern, he said, and that pattern is within you. Imagine the shock. Ordinary farmers, mothers, and workers sat in silence as they realized these words overturned everything they had been taught, that they were powerless, sinful, cut off from God. Here, Cayce insisted the opposite. The divine spark already lived in them, waiting to be awakened. For some, it was terrifying. For others, it was the first time hope felt real. This was not religion as control, but spirituality as liberation. During the Great Depression, people traveled across states, even selling belongings, just to sit in those sessions. They did not come for sermons, they came for survival. Their banks had collapsed, jobs were gone, and families were starving. Yet what they received was something more enduring than money. The conviction that they were not abandoned. Cayce's voice, calm in trance, told them that awakening Christ consciousness meant discovering an inner source of strength no crisis could erase. He explained that prayer was not begging a distant God, but aligning with the divine presence already flowing through the soul. He warned that without awakening this inner pattern, humanity would remain enslaved to fear. But if even a few people lived it, entire communities could transform. This was the lost secret. Jesus was the perfect example, but not the exception. Each person had the same potential. The question was, would they choose to awaken it? Cayce explained that awakening Christ consciousness was not about memorizing sacred words or belonging to a church. It was about living the same vibration Jesus embodied: compassion, forgiveness, service, and unwavering trust in God. During a session that changed the life of a struggling family, Cayce said something unforgettable. Your healing will come not only from what you take into the body, but from what you release from the heart. The mother had been consumed by bitterness. The father was crushed by fear. Cayce pointed them toward the Christ pattern within, urging them to pray not for rescue, but for alignment. Months later, they reported a shift so profound that even neighbors noticed. Illness began to ease, and harmony returned to their home. To them, this was no theory. It was a miracle rooted in an awakened state of consciousness. He often compared this process to tuning a radio. The divine signal was always present, but static. Fear, pride, resentment blocked the frequency. Prayer, meditation, and selfless service acted like adjustments on the dial, clearing the noise until the soul could hear the living Christ vibration. In 1932, he warned that ignoring this inner alignment would leave humanity trapped in endless cycles of violence and despair. But he also promised that if enough people lived with this awareness, they could shift not just their personal lives, but the fate of nations. For audiences living through economic collapse and approaching global war, these words carried weight. Imagine sitting in Virginia Beach, listening to a man in trance tell you that the solution to the world's chaos was hidden inside your own consciousness. It was unsettling. It was revolutionary. Cayce described Jesus not as a distant savior, but as the perfect demonstration of what it meant to fully awaken Christ consciousness. He called him the pattern, the example humanity must follow. This was radical because it suggested that divinity was not reserved for a chosen few, but was the destiny of every soul. Each act of forgiveness was a step into the pattern. Each choice of love over hate was proof that the Christ within was stirring. People who once believed they were insignificant suddenly realized they carried the same light that moved through Jesus. For the broken farmer, the grieving mother, the soldier on the front lines, this truth became a lifeline. Even science, though skeptical, would eventually echo what Cayce proclaimed. Decades later, research in psychology and medicine revealed the undeniable power of belief, thought, and inner states on the body's biology. What Cayce had said during the Depression, that consciousness shapes reality, was now supported by evidence of mind-body connection. But for those who heard him in the 1930s and 40s, no proof was needed. They had already lived the transformation. They had seen bitterness dissolve into peace, sickness give way to recovery, despair turn into resilience. That was the fruit of awakening Christ consciousness. And for Cayce, that was the real lost secret. Not to worship Christ from a distance, but to let the Christ live through you, here and now. During the Great Depression, Cayce's message about Christ consciousness became a lifeline for thousands who felt abandoned by the world. Bread lines stretched through city streets, banks collapsed overnight, and families slept in barns or empty train stations. In that climate of despair, his words were almost unthinkable. The outer world may collapse, but the kingdom within you cannot be touched. Imagine hearing that when your children were hungry and your future uncertain. It wasn't empty comfort. People left those sessions with a strength that could not be explained by money or circumstance. They walked out with heads held higher, convinced that something greater lived inside them, and that it could not be destroyed by poverty. To them, awakening Christ consciousness was not abstract. It was survival. As the 1940s brought the horrors of war, Cayce's readings grew even more urgent. He reminded listeners that wars began not only in governments, but in human hearts. Hatred breeds hatred. Love disarms it, he said in trance. The idea that global conflict could be traced back to individual consciousness was groundbreaking, even offensive to some. Yet for others, it was the only message that made sense. Cayce called for prayer circles, acts of service, and forgiveness inside homes as a means of influencing the larger world. To him, every home was a battlefield where Christ consciousness could either be awakened or ignored. Mothers, fathers, and even children were told their choices mattered in the cosmic struggle between light and darkness. It gave people a sense of responsibility far beyond their small lives. They were channels through which divine love could enter a wounded world. Testimonies from Virginia Beach and Hopkinsville confirm how deeply these teachings affected people. A soldier's mother reported that she prayed daily as Cayce instructed, focusing not on fear, but on the Christ vibration. Her son returned from Europe against all odds, alive when doctors had given no hope. Farmers said they found new resilience when they prayed before planting, seeing their fields not only as land, but as sacred ground. Businessmen ruined by economic collapse testified that service to others restored their sense of dignity and opened unexpected doors. Skeptics mocked these stories, but for the ones who lived them, the proof was undeniable. Christ consciousness was not philosophy. It was power. And yet, Cayce also warned that awakening it would never be easy. Ego, greed, resentment, these forces resisted every step. He described the inner struggle as a war just as fierce as any fought with weapons. But he also insisted that victory was possible. The Christ is ever present, he told a small gathering during the war years. You need not call him down. You must rise to meet him. Those who heard him that day said the room fell silent. For a moment, it felt as if an unseen presence filled the air. People wept, prayed, and left determined to live differently. They carried the secret with them. The world may be at war, but the battle for Christ consciousness was within, and it was a war they could win. Cayce never allowed people to believe that awakening Christ consciousness was reserved for saints or mystics. He emphasized that it was for ordinary workers, farmers, and families struggling with daily burdens. He told them that the divine was not hidden in distant temples but lived in their choices, thoughts, and actions. A businessman broken by financial loss once asked Cayce how to recover. Instead of promising prosperity, Cayce told him to feed the hungry and serve without expectation. Reluctantly, the man began helping in a soup kitchen. Weeks later, he testified that the depression weighing on his soul lifted. His circumstances had not changed overnight, but his spirit had. This was the essence of Christ consciousness in practice, service as the doorway to transformation. In another session, a woman tormented by resentment begged Cayce for healing. His response was uncompromising. You cannot be whole while holding hatred, he said in trance. He explained that her body's suffering was tied to her refusal to forgive. She resisted at first, but months later, after releasing her bitterness, her physical pain began to dissolve. To those who witnessed it, this was not coincidence. It was proof that consciousness itself could reshape health. For Cayce, forgiveness was not moral advice, it was spiritual medicine. and countless seekers discovered that applying his counsel brought results that defied conventional explanation. This is what distinguished Cayce from many religious voices of his time. He did not demand blind belief. He gave practical steps: prayer, meditation, forgiveness, service, and told people to test them in their own lives. If practiced sincerely, he promised, the Christ within would awaken, and the evidence would be undeniable. Families reported harmony returning to homes long divided. Soldiers wrote letters saying they felt a strength beyond themselves in the heat of battle. Mothers said their prayers seemed to carry peace into rooms filled with fear. Again and again, the pattern repeated. When people aligned with Christ consciousness, something changed that could not be explained by logic alone. But Cayce also warned that this awakening would demand sacrifice. The ego would resist, whispering that anger, pride, and fear were safer. He described this battle as the true Armageddon, not fought in fields, but in the human heart. Every soul must choose, he declared, the pattern of self or the pattern of Christ. To those living in an age of war, these words cut deep. They realized that victory over nations meant little if hatred continued to reign within. And so, prayer circles grew, not just as rituals, but as acts of resistance against fear. In living rooms and barns, ordinary people joined what Cayce saw as the greatest revolution in history, the awakening of divine consciousness in humanity. Cayce's insistence that Christ consciousness was the true destiny of humanity raised questions that still echo today. If this power exists within us, why does the world remain filled with suffering, hatred, and division? His answer was simple but profound. Most people never choose to awaken it. They are lulled by fear, blinded by materialism, or distracted by the noise of daily life. In one reading, he compared the soul to a lamp hidden under layers of dust. The light never goes out, but until the dust is cleared, through prayer, forgiveness, and service, it cannot shine. This metaphor struck listeners deeply. They realized their struggles were not proof of God's absence, but proof of their own neglect to awaken what was already inside them. During the 1940s, he urged people to see even suffering as an opportunity. Pain, he explained, could act as a call to remembrance, forcing the soul to look inward for strength. He reminded audiences that Jesus himself endured hardship not as punishment, but as demonstration of how divine consciousness could transform even the darkest hour. This perspective shifted how many saw their own trials. Instead of curses, they became chances to live the Christ pattern more fully. Mothers who had lost sons in war said they found peace in serving others' children. Men who had been broken by poverty discovered new dignity in acts of kindness. Slowly, communities transformed, not because their circumstances changed instantly, but because their consciousness did. Yet Cayce warned repeatedly, awakening Christ consciousness was not about escaping the world. It was about redeeming it. He criticized those who sought mystical experiences only for personal pleasure. The true test, he said, was whether the awakened soul lived differently, more patient with others, more generous in service, more steadfast in truth. Anything less was illusion. This was why he placed so much emphasis on daily practice. Meditation was not retreat, but preparation. Prayer was not begging, but alignment. Service was not charity, but the highest expression of divine love. These disciplines, he insisted, were the steps by which an ordinary person became a living channel of the Christ. Many found this vision unsettling because it demanded responsibility. If Christ consciousness was within everyone, then no one could hide behind excuses of unworthiness or helplessness. Every soul was accountable for what they did with the light inside them. To hear this in the midst of depression and war was both burden and gift. People left Cayce's sessions realizing they could no longer see themselves as powerless victims of fate. They were participants in a larger spiritual drama. Their lives mattered because through them, the divine could enter the world. And once someone embraced that truth, they could never return to the smallness of who they thought they were. Cayce often emphasized that awakening Christ consciousness was not a distant goal for future generations. It was a present responsibility. He told audiences that every day, in the smallest choices, souls had the chance to either mirror the divine or deny it. A kind word to a neighbor, patience in a moment of anger, generosity when scarcity tempted selfishness. These were not small gestures, but sacred acts that tuned the soul to the Christ vibration. He insisted that no prayer was wasted, no act of love went unnoticed, because each one created ripples in the collective consciousness of humanity. This was perhaps the most radical element of his teaching, that individuals carried responsibility not just for themselves, but for the spiritual health of the entire world. In one trance session, he declared, "When one soul lifts itself to the Christ pattern, it raises the vibration of all." Those who heard it felt the weight of this statement. It meant their personal journey was not isolated. It was part of a cosmic web. A mother praying in Kentucky, a farmer showing mercy in Ohio, a child forgiving in Virginia Beach. All of them were threads weaving a new reality. Listeners left those rooms believing they were part of something vast and eternal. Even skeptics who dismissed Cayce as naive could not deny the courage and hope his followers displayed in the darkest times. For them, Christ consciousness was no longer abstract. It was proof that light could break into the darkest corners of history. Cayce warned, however, that this awakening would test every part of a person. He spoke of temptations that would try to pull souls back into fear, greed, and anger. He reminded them that Jesus himself faced trials not in spite of his divine awareness, but because of it. To embody Christ consciousness was to invite resistance, from within the ego and from the world. Yet he insisted that perseverance brought rewards beyond imagination. Peace, he said, is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of Christ within the struggle. These words became anchors for people who faced battles both personal and global. They realized that their hardships were not barriers to awakening, but doorways through which the divine presence revealed itself more fully. And in his most daring statements, Cayce claimed that the future of humanity hinged on this awakening. He predicted that unless people began to embody Christ consciousness collectively, the world would face destruction not only through wars and disasters, but through spiritual decay. Yet he also held out a vision of extraordinary hope, a time when enough souls, awakened to the Christ within, could transform the very course of history. For him, this was not speculation, it was destiny. Humanity was designed to evolve into beings who lived in harmony with divine law. The question was not whether this awakening was possible, but whether humanity would choose it in time. As the years passed, Cayce's words did not fade. They grew louder in the memories of those who heard them. Families who once came to him in despair carried his teachings into their daily lives, raising children with the conviction that God was not a distant ruler, but an indwelling presence. Some of those children, decades later, testified that the stability of their faith and the strength of their character were born in living rooms where Cayce's counsel was read aloud after supper. In Virginia Beach, prayer circles continued long after Cayce's death, each member believing that their collective intention was a direct participation in awakening Christ consciousness across the earth. These were not people chasing mystical visions. They were farmers, nurses, teachers, ordinary souls convinced that their inner alignment could shape the destiny of nations. Cayce often insisted that the evolution of humanity itself depended on this awakening. He foresaw an age when scientific discoveries would confirm the realities of spirit, when psychology would finally admit the mind's power over the body, and when religion would return to its core, the living presence of Christ in every soul. He warned that until then, people would continue to wander in conflict and confusion. But he also promised that every effort to embody Christ consciousness brought the world one step closer to its divine purpose. Each soul, he said, is a savior to another. The implication was staggering. The fate of one was bound to the fate of all. For modern audiences, Cayce's message remains piercing. In a world of constant distraction, fear-driven news, and division, his reminder is as urgent as it was in the 1930s. The Christ within is not an idea to admire, but a force to awaken. Today, this awakening may not require traveling to Virginia Beach or sitting in a session. It may begin in a quiet room, in 5 minutes of genuine prayer, in forgiving a betrayal, in choosing compassion when anger feels easier. Each act becomes a step into the pattern Jesus demonstrated. Each choice clears the static on the dial and tunes the soul to the frequency of the divine. And so, Cayce's lost secret is not truly lost. It is alive in anyone willing to claim it. He did not present Christ consciousness as unreachable mysticism, but as practical truth meant to transform ordinary lives. For those who heard him, it was a revelation that changed everything. For us today, it is an invitation. The seed has always been there, buried beneath fear, waiting for courage, forgiveness, and love to bring it to life. The pattern has already been shown. The only question left, the same one Cayce asked nearly a century ago, is this: will you awaken the Christ within you? If these words touched your soul, then this is your moment. Do not let it pass as another idea you only hear and forget. Edgar Cayce reminded us that the Christ within is not waiting for some future time. It is waiting now, in you. The same pattern that healed the sick, lifted the broken, and gave strength in the darkest chapters of history is alive in your heart at this very second. The only step left is yours. Begin with prayer, even if only for a minute. Forgive someone you have held in your heart too long. Choose love when anger feels easier. These simple choices are not small. They are the awakening. They are the revolution. They are how the light of Christ returns to the world through you. So if this message resonated, join our community. Like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe so you don't miss the revelations still to come. Write in the comments where you are watching from, and if you felt the presence of something greater as you listened. Because the truth is, you are not alone, and your awakening matters. The secret Cayce revealed was never meant to stay hidden in archives or memories. It was meant to live in every soul willing to rise. The Christ is within you, and now is the time to awaken.
In one of his most striking readings from the early 1930s, Edgar Cayce was asked a question that startled even those accustomed to his remarkable insights. What truly happened during the unknown years of Jesus' adolescence? Most of us are familiar with the story of his birth, and we know about his ministry that began in his 30s. But what about the silent years in between? In that quiet period, spanning nearly 2 decades, the Bible offers little detail, leaving room for speculation and mystery. Cayce, in trance, touched on this hidden phase, offering glimpses that many describe as both reverent and transformative. Before we unfold this profound revelation, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who is curious about the life of Jesus, and subscribe to our channel. Comment what you think about this mystery. I'll heart every comment because your perspective matters in building this community. Cayce's words were not dramatic inventions, but careful impressions, often delivered while he rested on a couch in Virginia Beach or during earlier years in Hopkinsville. Those present were ordinary families, seekers, sometimes medical doctors, and spiritual leaders looking for answers. In one life-changing session, during the Great Depression, a family desperate for spiritual guidance asked about the missing years of Jesus. The reading did not come with theatrics of prophecy. It came gently, with language simple enough for anyone in the room to understand. Cayce described a youth who was far more than a carpenter's son. He was a soul preparing for a mission that would change humanity forever. According to these readings, adolescence was not wasted in idleness. It was a time of learning, traveling, and quietly building the strength of character required for the path ahead. Historical context matters here. During those years, regions like Galilee and Judea were under Roman occupation, and life was not easy for Jewish families. Opportunities were scarce, and poverty was widespread. To speak of a boy growing up in such a climate, preparing for a mission of compassion and universal love, carried a powerful message to those listening in Cayce's time. It was the early 20th century, an era scarred by world wars and economic collapse. And yet Cayce spoke of a hidden hope, that Jesus himself endured a formative period that resembled the struggles of every human adolescent. It made him relatable, human, and approachable, while still being divinely guided. This duality, fully human and fully divine, was what Cayce illuminated with humility and reverence. One striking statement he made was that Jesus traveled beyond his home region during those years, encountering wisdom traditions that broadened his awareness. Cayce mentioned lands where spiritual practices had long been cultivated, places where healing and meditation were central. Though skeptics dismissed these accounts as speculation, Those who had followed Cayce's work saw continuity in his descriptions. He was not inventing folklore. He was channeling information consistent with his lifetime of readings on reincarnation, soul journeys, and the preparation of the Messiah. What startled listeners was not simply where Jesus may have traveled, but how universal his mission became in adolescence. He absorbed knowledge that transcended cultural and religious barriers, preparing him to later deliver teachings of love, forgiveness, and unity that applied to all people, not just one group. During one session in Virginia Beach, Cayce explained that these formative years were essential to what later became known as Christ consciousness. He described adolescence as the period when the young Jesus was not only physically maturing, but also awakening to the vast memory of the soul. In Cayce's perspective, each of us carries within us records from past lives, what he called the Akashic records. For Jesus, these records were not blurred or hidden. They unfolded naturally as he grew, shaping his awareness that he was destined for something extraordinary. Imagine being a teenager and slowly realizing that your purpose was to embody divine love for the entire world. Cayce suggested that this realization came not as a sudden lightning bolt, but as a steady light growing brighter with each year. That picture made listeners lean closer because it humanized what many thought was untouchable mystery. Skeptics often asked, but how could Cayce know such things? This was not blind imagination. From the early 1900s, thousands of people had documented Cayce's readings, carefully transcribed, archived, and studied by the Association for Research and Enlightenment. In these documents, one finds recurring details that connect across different sessions. Cayce consistently portrayed Jesus as a youth deeply committed to preparation, discipline, and compassion. One family that sought guidance during the dark years of World War II heard Cayce say that understanding Jesus' adolescence could inspire young men and women facing fear, loss, and uncertainty. If the Messiah himself endured a path of silence, growth, and struggle before stepping into his mission, then perhaps every young person's pain or confusion held hidden meaning too. The emphasis was never on exotic legends, but on spiritual application. Cayce explained that the lessons Jesus absorbed in adolescence were not just for him, they were archetypal for humanity. He spoke of disciplines of the body, mind, and spirit that mirror what modern seekers recognize as meditation, prayer, and service to others. These practices, Cayce said, became the scaffolding of Jesus' public ministry. They were the silent years where the foundation was laid. He compared them to the unseen roots of a tree, invisible but essential, hidden yet sustaining the greatness that would one day be revealed. When audiences in the 1930s and 40s heard this, it gave them courage. If the unseen years of struggle could produce such fruit, then perhaps their own hidden struggles were preparing them for a larger purpose. One particularly moving detail Cayce shared was about the harmony between Jesus and his earthly family. Though he faced the same tensions any adolescent might, there was a deep respect and sense of mission within the household. Cayce reminded listeners that Jesus was not isolated in a supernatural bubble. He lived among people, worked with his hands, and knew the taste of sweat and labor. This made his later message of compassion real, not abstract. When he spoke of the poor, he had lived their life. When he spoke of healing, he had witnessed suffering firsthand. The adolescent years, Cayce emphasized, were the bridge between heaven and earth, teaching Jesus how to walk in both realms at once. And that revelation, that the Messiah's power was forged in ordinary human experiences, shook the hearts of those who came to Cayce looking for hope. Cayce went further, explaining that adolescence was not a period of waiting, but of active training. He described Jesus studying with teachers who carried fragments of wisdom from ancient traditions, remnants of knowledge stretching back to Egypt, Persia, and lands of the East. While Cayce avoided sensationalism, he consistently pointed to a universal thread, that Jesus, as a young man, absorbed truths beyond the narrow borders of his homeland. This was not to diminish his divinity, but to show that his mission was inclusive, destined to reach every culture and every soul. According to Cayce, these encounters were less about doctrines and more about practices, healing methods, meditation, fasting, and the balance of body and spirit. When read in context, These insights drew a powerful image of a youth preparing in silence, gathering tools that would later be seen in his miracles, parables, and teachings of unconditional love. In one documented case during the Great Depression, a small group gathered in Virginia Beach with heavy questions on their hearts. They asked Cayce about the unseen years of Jesus, seeking comfort for their own families torn by poverty and fear. Cayce's response gave them perspective. He reminded them that even the Christ child endured years of obscurity before his mission began. He worked, studied, and grew in strength and wisdom. This message became deeply relevant to those struggling. If Jesus' hidden years were necessary for his divine purpose, then perhaps their own hidden struggles carried meaning too. That revelation transformed despair into patience, urging them to see their trials as preparation rather than punishment. For many, that night was unforgettable, because it connected their pain with the larger story of humanity's greatest teacher. Cayce's emphasis was always on application. He did not describe the adolescence of Jesus to satisfy curiosity or stir debate. Instead, he framed it as a model for human growth. Adolescence, he said, is the time when each soul begins to remember its deeper calling. For Jesus, that calling unfolded clearly. For us, it emerges in smaller ways, through intuition, through struggles, through the search for meaning. Cayce urged listeners not to idolize the mystery, but to reflect. How are you preparing in your own silent years? What lessons are you gathering in times when no one is watching? This was the genius of his teaching. He connected the most mysterious period of Christ's life to the very ordinary struggles of those listening in his day, whether in Kentucky, Virginia, or anywhere across America. And then came one of the most startling statements. Cayce said that during these years, Jesus not only learned but healed. Imagine that, a young man, still unknown to the world, already practicing the compassion that would later define his ministry. The stories of these healings were not recorded in the Gospels, but Cayce insisted they occurred in quiet, in small communities, witnessed by a few. These acts were not about fame or recognition. They were training, practice, and service. They revealed that even before the public miracles, the power of divine love was already flowing through him. When this was shared in the 1940s, listeners felt chills. It was not fiction, not legend. It was a glimpse into a sacred truth that Cayce delivered with humility, insisting it was not his own knowledge, but information accessed through the infinite mind of God. As these readings circulated, many began to see Jesus' adolescence not as a missing puzzle piece, but as a deliberate silence meant to teach us something profound. Cayce explained that the absence of detail in Scripture was itself a lesson. Growth happens in hidden seasons, away from the spotlight. Just as a seed germinates underground before breaking through the soil, Jesus' preparation unfolded quietly, far from public recognition. This perspective resonated deeply in America during times of hardship. Families in Virginia Beach and beyond, reeling from war and economic despair, found hope in the idea that their own invisible struggles might be part of a divine design. It was a reminder that obscurity is not abandonment. It can be sacred preparation. Cayce's words carried the weight of empathy, delivered not with dogma, but with the tenderness of someone who truly understood human pain and divine possibility. Another layer of these revelations was the universality of Jesus' mission. Cayce stressed that adolescence was when the young Christ absorbed the essence of different traditions and wove them into a unified understanding of God's love. He was never bound by cultural walls. The wisdom of healing, the practice of prayer, the discipline of silence, all became threads in a larger tapestry that pointed humanity back to its source. This was not speculation. It was consistent across multiple readings. People who attended these sessions noted how seamlessly Cayce returned to this theme, that adolescence was the period of integration, where knowledge from many paths crystallized into the message that would later shake the foundations of the world. For modern audiences, this is powerful because it reveals Jesus not as distant, but as deeply connected to the whole human family. Cayce also reminded listeners that adolescence is universally difficult. It is a time of identity, conflict, and search for meaning. By showing that even Jesus walked through that valley, Cayce gave hope to young people who felt lost. He spoke during an era when American youth were being drafted into wars, when families were fractured, and when many questioned the future. Cayce's message was clear. If the Messiah himself had to walk silently through confusion, temptation, and growth, then your struggle is not meaningless. It may be shaping your destiny. This teaching touched hearts not just in churches, but in living rooms, farms, and hospitals, wherever people longed to believe their pain had purpose. It reframed adolescence as sacred ground, where the soul remembers who it truly is. And then, in one of the most profound moments recorded in his readings, Cayce said that during these hidden years, Jesus consciously chose humility. He could have revealed his identity early. He could have astonished crowds with miracles as a boy. But he didn't. According to Cayce, the choice to remain hidden was itself the miracle. It showed that true power does not seek attention. It prepares in silence until the right moment. This struck listeners as a divine paradox. The most extraordinary being in history chose an ordinary life for nearly 20 years. That choice revealed a love so patient, so disciplined, that it became the ultimate preparation for his public ministry. For those who heard this in the 1930s and 40s, it was more than history. It was a call to patience, faith, and trust in divine timing. Modern scholars at the Association for Research and Enlightenment often point out that Cayce never sensationalized these hidden years. Instead, he presented them as a model of spiritual formation that applies to everyone. Adolescence, in Cayce's view, is the time when the soul begins to remember its eternal purpose, though often in subtle, confusing ways. By highlighting Jesus' adolescence, Cayce reminded seekers that even the greatest teacher in history had to walk through the same valley of growth, self-discovery, and discipline. This perspective stripped away the idea that spiritual greatness arrives fully formed. Instead, it affirmed that transformation is a process, and that hidden years matter just as much as public ones. For the people listening in Virginia Beach, especially during the uncertainty of the post-war years, this was deeply comforting. It told them their quiet struggles at home, unseen by the world, still carried eternal meaning. Cayce's revelations also reshaped how many understood Christ consciousness. He described Jesus' adolescence as the period when this awareness became clearer, an unfolding recognition that he was not separate from God, but one with divine love. This idea was not abstract philosophy. It was grounded in lived experience, work, travel, study, and quiet service. For Cayce, Christ consciousness was not reserved only for Jesus. It was a potential within every human being. Adolescence, with all its confusion and searching, could become the threshold where people awakened to that truth. To the families who came seeking answers, this message was both radical and deeply practical. It suggested that their children's struggles, their own doubts, and their hidden battles were not failures but invitations to remember their spiritual identity. Some of the most moving stories from those years involve individuals who left Cayce's sessions with renewed strength. One man, burdened with fear during World War II, later said that hearing Cayce speak of Jesus' silent preparation gave him the courage to face his own unknown future. A mother from Ohio grieving the loss of a son wrote that Cayce's description of the young Christ reminded her that God's timing often hides its purpose until much later. These testimonies, preserved in the archives of the ARE, reveal how profoundly these readings touched ordinary lives. They were not meant to be intellectual curiosities. They were lifelines for people living through some of history's darkest times. And still, the mystery remains. The Bible remains silent on these years, and Cayce's readings do not claim to fill every gap. Instead, they offer a lens, a perspective that turns silence into sacred instruction. By embracing the unknown years as purposeful, we are invited to reconsider our own seasons of obscurity. Maybe the times when nothing seems to be happening are when the deepest preparation is taking place. Cayce's message echoes through generations. What seems hidden is not wasted, and what feels like delay may be divine timing. As he once said, the soul grows most in the silence. And for those reflecting on Jesus' adolescence, that truth is not just historical, it is personal. Today, seekers across the world still revisit Cayce's descriptions of the hidden years of Jesus as a guide for their own spiritual practice. The readings consistently linked the adolescence of Christ with disciplines we can all apply. Prayer as a daily anchor, meditation as a doorway to divine connection, and service as the highest form of learning. Cayce explained that these practices, cultivated quietly during Jesus' youth, later became the foundation of his public ministry. They were not just religious duties, but transformative tools. For instance, when Cayce spoke about the value of silent meditation, he pointed back to the adolescent Christ, who withdrew often into quiet spaces to commune with the Father. To modern audiences, this lesson remains powerful. Your inner life, though unseen, shapes the destiny of your outer life. The message is timeless, reminding us that what we build in silence eventually becomes visible in our actions and relationships. The influence of these teachings reaches beyond church walls. In Virginia Beach, lectures at the ARE still emphasize how Cayce portrayed Jesus' adolescence as a model of balance, body, mind, and spirit in harmony. Physical work, such as carpentry or labor alongside his family, was not separate from spiritual growth, but part of it. Cayce insisted that spirituality is not confined to temples or altars. It is lived in daily choices, chores, and encounters with others. This was revolutionary for listeners in the 1930s, who often thought holiness belonged only to priests or sacred rituals. By framing Jesus' hidden years as a time of ordinary labor infused with divine purpose, Cayce helped everyday people see their own work as sacred. Even washing dishes, tending fields, or repairing tools could become training for the soul when done with awareness of God's presence. These insights have also influenced modern approaches to adolescence itself. Psychologists and spiritual teachers inspired by Cayce note that the teenage years are when identity is formed and choices begin to define character. By pointing to Jesus' adolescence as a season of integration, Cayce encouraged parents to treat this stage not as rebellion to be feared, but as preparation to be supported. He reassured families that confusion is natural and that even the greatest soul to walk the earth faced seasons of uncertainty. This perspective transformed fear into patience, helping parents guide their children with compassion rather than control. In countless ARE gatherings across decades, this teaching has been repeated. Adolescence is not the problem, it is the pathway. One of Cayce's most repeated phrases during these readings was that the pattern was set. By this, he meant that the adolescence of Jesus established the rhythm and foundation that his later ministry would follow. Healing the sick, forgiving enemies, teaching love, these were not random acts. They were the natural outflow of years of hidden discipline, silent study, and humble service. This truth continues to inspire spiritual communities who study Cayce today. They see in Jesus' adolescence not just a mystery resolved, but a challenge issued. Are we preparing in our hidden years? Are we laying a foundation of prayer, compassion, and humility that will sustain us when our public moments arrive? For many, this has become the heartbeat of their spiritual journey, guided by Cayce's reverent words. One of the most striking moments in the archives comes from a session in the early 1940s, when a small circle asked Cayce directly about the wisdom Jesus carried as a young man. In a calm voice, while in trance, Cayce said, "He knew from youth that his work was to fulfill the law of love, yet he chose to walk the path of every man." This statement stunned those in the room. It revealed that adolescence was not a time of ignorance, but of conscious humility. Jesus was aware of his mission, yet he accepted the ordinary struggles of youth, growth, work, responsibility, without demanding recognition. For listeners, the weight of those words was unforgettable. It meant that the Son of God chose to experience the human journey fully, so he could speak to humanity with genuine compassion. Many present described tears filling their eyes because it reframed their understanding of divinity. Power revealed not in avoiding human life, but in embracing it. Another unforgettable phrase emerged in a reading requested by a family coping with illness during the Great Depression. They asked how to remain faithful when so little made sense. Cayce responded by drawing a parallel to Jesus' hidden years, saying, "Even the Master waited, Even the Christ child endured seasons unseen. Your waiting is not wasted. Those words became a lifeline. In an age of despair, the thought that waiting could be sacred transformed lives. To this day, that phrase circulates in study groups and sermons across ARE circles, reminding seekers that the silence of God may in fact be the deepest preparation of all. It was not poetry for effect. It was spiritual truth, spoken with the authority of one whose readings had guided thousands through crises. Cayce also gave glimpses into the disciplines of healing that Jesus practiced even as a youth. In one session, he explained that the laying on of hands and the use of prayer for physical renewal were not techniques Jesus suddenly discovered in adulthood. They were skills refined quietly in adolescence. Imagine a teenage boy offering comfort to the sick, not for recognition but out of pure compassion. For those listening, this revelation was almost too moving to describe. It was as if a veil had been lifted, showing that divine love had always been present, quietly training itself in the shadows of daily life. And yet, Cayce was careful to avoid exaggeration. He reminded listeners that these stories were not for entertainment, but for transformation. What he did, you may do also if you keep the law of love. The emotional intensity of these readings left a permanent mark on many who heard them. People wrote letters to the ARE, saying that for the first time they could picture Jesus not as a distant figure on stained glass windows, but as someone who had walked through the very struggles they faced. Adolescence, once seen as an empty gap in Scripture, became a bridge of empathy. This was Cayce's gift, not to fill silence with speculation, but to show that silence itself can speak louder than words. In the mystery of Jesus' adolescence, he revealed a pattern of hidden growth, patient waiting, and silent preparation that continues to guide seekers nearly a century later. As we move toward the heart of Cayce's message, it becomes clear that the mysterious adolescence of Jesus was never meant to remain a blank page in history. Instead, it serves as a mirror for our own hidden years, those seasons when nothing seems to move forward, when prayers feel unanswered, when our efforts go unseen. Cayce's voice echoed through decades, insisting that these seasons are not empty, they are preparation. Just as Jesus used adolescence to cultivate wisdom, discipline, and compassion, so too are we invited to see our struggles as sacred training grounds. This truth remains timeless, and for many who listened to Cayce in Virginia Beach or studied his archived readings later, it was the single most liberating perspective they had ever heard. What felt like delay became destiny. What seemed like silence became the soil of transformation. The implications for modern seekers are profound. If the Christ himself endured a period of obscurity, then our own hidden struggles are not disqualifications, but confirmations that something larger may be at work. Cayce's accounts remind us that preparation often looks like ordinary life, working, serving, learning, and waiting. He urged people to trust divine timing, assuring them that nothing surrendered in love is ever wasted. When applied today, this lesson can change how we approach our own lives. The frustrations of adolescence, the monotony of work, the uncertainty of waiting, they may all be echoes of the same pattern Jesus lived. For audiences today, this message still carries weight, reminding us that the greatest transformations often happen far from the public eye. And so when we reflect on the mysterious adolescence of Jesus, as revealed by Cayce, we are not asked to fill in the silence with legends. We are asked to embrace the silence itself as holy. This is why Cayce's words remain relevant across generations. They lift the burden of needing to see immediate results and replace it with trust in a divine process. For the youth searching for identity, for the parent guiding their children, for the seeker waiting in prayer, the message is the same. The hidden years matter. They are the years where character is forged, faith is deepened, and destiny is quietly prepared. Jesus walked that path, and through Cayce's insights we are reminded that we walk it too. If this journey through Cayce's revelations has touched you, I invite you to pause and reflect. What hidden season are you living right now? Could it be that the silence is shaping you for something greater? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll mark each one with a little heart because your reflections build a community of seekers walking this path together. And don't forget to like this video. share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next exploration into the mysteries of spirit, history, and consciousness. Together, we continue to uncover the truths that Cayce so humbly revealed, truth that still whisper through the silence of Jesus' adolescence, guiding us all toward deeper love and higher purpose. Picture this. You walk into your home after a long day, and before you even say a word, your dog is already at your side. Its eyes are locked on you, tail wagging, or maybe not wagging at all. Somehow, it knows exactly how you feel. To most people, that's just loyalty or instinct. But according to Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet, there is something far deeper happening. In one of his most impactful readings from the 1930s, he revealed that animals, especially dogs, don't just respond to physical cues. They are attuned to the invisible vibrations of our inner life. Your joy, your fear, your sorrow, these are energies your dog senses and reacts to, often before you're even aware of them yourself. That's why Cayce suggested that dogs, more than any other animal, mirror the state of our soul in daily life. This isn't just a sentimental thought. During sessions that changed the lives of families who came to him, Cayce described animals as part of the universal field of creation. He explained that while they don't have individual souls in the same way humans do, they are linked to a collective consciousness of their species, and dogs, through their closeness to us, serve as living barometers of our spiritual and emotional state. When your dog leans into you at your lowest moment, or reacts to unseen presences in the room, Cayce would argue that it is not mere behavior, it is perception that transcends what science has yet been able to explain. Before we go deeper, let me ask you to do something simple. If this subject already touches you in some way, hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves dogs, and subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me how your dog has surprised you with a perception beyond words. I'll be marking each comment with a little heart to show that I'm reading every one of your stories. Now think back to history. In Virginia Beach during the Great Depression, families often brought not only their children, but their animals into Cayce's orbit. People came desperate for guidance, seeking health, direction, or simply comfort in a time when the world felt uncertain. And while Cayce never claimed to be a veterinarian, his insights often extended to the animals that shared people's lives. He spoke of how the health of a household could be reflected in the behavior of the family dog. A restless, anxious animal might point to unresolved tension or unspoken fear lingering among the humans it lived with. For Cayce, this wasn't accidental. It was the natural order of creation revealing itself. Dogs, in this perspective, were never just pets. They were reminders of our own inner condition, reflections of the vibration we broadcast daily. Cayce's words implied that when we ignore this, we miss a vital piece of our spiritual growth. The connection with our dogs is not one-sided affection. It is a dialogue of energy, a constant feedback loop between what we carry inside and what they return to us through loyalty, fear, or unconditional love. As the years went on, Cayce's reputation grew, and with it came a steady flow of people seeking answers not only about their own illnesses or life direction, but also about the mysterious behaviors of the animals they loved. During a session that forever marked a family in the Midwest, Cayce noted that their dog's unusual behavior, barking constantly at night and staring into corners, was not madness or illness, but sensitivity to vibrations in the environment. He explained that dogs were highly receptive to what he called emanations of thought and spirit, meaning they could perceive not just physical presence, but also lingering energies from people, both living and departed. For many, this was both comforting and unsettling. If Cayce was right, then the faithful dog lying at their feet was a kind of sentinel between the visible and the invisible world. Cayce's descriptions always carried a tone of reverence. He reminded his listeners that animals should never be dismissed as simple creatures without purpose. They were designed by God to be companions and, in a way, teachers. Their ability to remain loyal, to forgive instantly, and to live in the present moment were qualities he believed humans desperately needed to relearn. When asked if animals reincarnated in the same way humans did, Cayce responded carefully. He explained that while animals are tied to a group consciousness, rather than an individualized soul, their connection to us can sometimes carry forward. That is why some people feel as if a new dog in their life has the same presence as one they lost years before. It's not the same soul returning, but rather the continuity of the bond that transcends a single lifetime. In Virginia Beach, where Cayce lived and worked, people often recalled how he would encourage kindness not only toward neighbors, but also toward animals. He believed mistreating a dog, or any creature, was a violation of spiritual law, because all life participates in the great oneness of creation. In his view, cruelty toward animals created negative vibrations that would inevitably return to the person responsible. On the other hand, acts of compassion radiated outward, harmonizing the soul and uplifting the environment. Dogs, being deeply sensitive, became the first witnesses of these vibrations, often showing joy, peace, or anxiety long before humans noticed the changes within themselves. What Cayce emphasized repeatedly was that animals do not see us as we physically appear. Instead, they see us in terms of vibration, intention, and the essence of our inner being. A dog may greet you happily even if you are in worn clothes or carrying stress from work, but it is reacting to your spirit's condition. If your heart is heavy, the dog feels it. If your thoughts are filled with love, it reflects that joy back to you. This is why countless people have testified that their dogs became protectors in times of grief, healers during sickness, and loyal companions when the world felt against them. Cayce's reading simply gave voice to what many dog owners already sensed, that their animals were perceiving far more than science could easily explain. During the 1940s, as the world was engulfed in the turmoil of war, Cayce continued to give readings that emphasized the unseen layers of reality. For soldiers' families who came to him in Virginia Beach, dogs often became silent witnesses to the emotional storms inside the home. Cayce noted that many of these animals acted as if they carried the burden of the household. They would sit quietly beside grieving mothers, or refuse to eat when the family was in despair. To Cayce, this wasn't coincidence. He explained that animals, and especially dogs, were more aligned with the natural vibrations of creation, and therefore picked up immediately on shifts in emotional and spiritual states. They were, in his words, channels of perception, living reminders that energy is not just an abstract concept, but something tangible, felt, and responded to in daily life. Some of the most surprising moments came when Cayce linked dogs to the perception of spirits. In several readings, he hinted that what dogs often seem to bark at in empty spaces were presences not visible to the human eye. While many brushed this off as imagination, Cayce insisted that animals exist closer to the elemental forces of nature, and so their awareness is not filtered through logic and doubt the way human perception is. This means that when a dog growls at an unseen corner, or comforts you without any obvious trigger, it may be responding to real vibrations of the unseen world. For families who believed in Cayce, this changed how they interpreted the everyday actions of their pets. But Cayce also gave a warning. The way your dog responds to you is in many ways a reflection of your own spiritual condition. If a dog consistently reacts with fear or unease, it might be sensing the turmoil inside you. If it rests peacefully by your side, it could be because your inner vibration resonates with harmony. This was a powerful idea, because it placed responsibility on humans to be mindful of their thoughts and emotions, knowing that even their pets were affected by them. In that sense, Cayce's teachings about dogs were not just about animals. They were about us, about the mirror they hold up to our souls. And perhaps this is why the bond between humans and dogs has always been described as unconditional love. For Cayce, it wasn't unconditional in the sense of blindness. It was unconditional because the dog perceives who you are beyond your mistakes, beyond your social status, beyond your failures. It sees the essence of your being, the light and the shadow, and chooses to remain by your side. That is why he encouraged people never to overlook the role of their dogs in spiritual life. They are not only companions for the body, but silent guides for the heart. In their eyes, Cayce would say, "You are confronted not with judgment, but with the reflection of what you carry inside." One of the most remarkable aspects of Cayce's legacy is how ordinary families in places like Hopkinsville, Kentucky, or along the quiet neighborhoods of Virginia Beach would recall their dogs reacting strangely during his sessions. Visitors would later report that their pets, left waiting at home, had behaved in unusual ways on the very days the family sought a reading. To Cayce, this made perfect sense. The energetic ties within a family were so strong that even animals could sense the vibrations of spiritual work happening miles away. He taught that the human mind, when attuned to prayer or deep reflection, radiates waves of energy that ripple outward, influencing not only other people but also animals who are connected to that household. This was a revolutionary thought for the time, especially during an era when science dismissed such connections as superstition. Cayce's position placed animals at the center of a spiritual ecosystem. He said dogs could absorb negative energy from a household, sometimes to the detriment of their own well-being. When an owner carried bitterness, anger, or fear, the dog often mirrored that restlessness, becoming sick or withdrawn. Conversely, in homes filled with gratitude and kindness, dogs flourished with vitality, as if the positive vibrations of love nourished them physically and spiritually. This teaching created a profound sense of responsibility. Caring for a dog wasn't just about food and shelter, it was about the quality of thoughts, prayers, and emotions shared within the home. For skeptics, these ideas sounded poetic at best, but those who experienced them firsthand swore there was truth to Cayce's words. Mothers remembered dogs lying across the thresholds of bedrooms where children were ill, refusing to move until the sickness passed. Widows recalled their dogs reacting days before telegrams arrived with tragic news from the war front, as if they had already sensed the approaching sorrow. To Cayce, these weren't accidents of instinct. They were proof that animals, existing closer to the harmony of creation, could sense shifts in the unseen before they became visible events. He saw dogs not only as companions, but also as protectors, bridging the gap between what the human eye perceives and what the soul already knows. So, when we ask the question, what does your dog really see in you? Cayce's answer would be both comforting and sobering. Your dog sees more than your appearance, more than your words. It senses the truth of your spirit. It reflects your hidden joys, your silent griefs, and the vibrations you carry into every room. And in its loyalty, it offers a rare form of grace, the willingness to love you despite the shadows it perceives. That is why Cayce urged people to treat their dogs not as possessions, but as fellow travelers in the great school of life, placed in our path to remind us of the divine qualities of love, patience, and presence. As Cayce's work reached its later years, the theme of responsibility toward all living beings became more central. He was often asked about how humans should interact with the natural world, and he never failed to include animals in those teachings. In one session that deeply moved a family in Virginia during the post-war era, he reminded them that their dog's devotion was not simply a matter of training or instinct. It was, in fact, an echo of the divine order of creation. He explained that when a dog looks at you, it is not just recognizing your face or your voice. It is perceiving the vibration of your soul's current state. In those moments, you are seen not for your titles, your wealth, or your appearance, but for the truth of what you carry within. For many, this explanation reframed the entire relationship between humans and dogs, making every interaction a spiritual reminder. Cayce also connected this insight to the broader journey of the human soul. He suggested that just as we are shaped by our relationships with other people, we are also shaped by how we treat and respond to the animals entrusted to us. A dog's love, patience, and loyalty were qualities Cayce urged humans to reflect back, not just toward the animal itself, but toward each other. In this sense, the dog became a living teacher, reminding us that unconditional love is possible and that forgiveness can be instantaneous. These were, for Cayce, not small lessons. They were keys to spiritual growth, embedded in the daily companionship of an animal that many overlooked as ordinary. There is also something profoundly humbling in Cayce's reminder that animals respond to the vibrations we create. If a dog avoids us, it may be because we are carrying anger or fear. If it leans against us, it may be because it senses the need for comfort more deeply than words could express. This reflection forces us to ask, what does my dog see in me right now? Am I radiating love, peace, and patience, or am I broadcasting stress, resentment, and despair? For Cayce, this question was not about guilt, but about awareness. The dog was simply a mirror, and in its eyes we could find a truth we often hide from ourselves. And let me pause here to remind you again, if these revelations about Cayce and the hidden perception of dogs are resonating with you, please like this video, share it with a friend who loves animals, and subscribe to this channel. In the comments, tell me if you've ever felt your dog sensed something beyond the visible. I'll be marking those comments with a heart to honor your stories. In his final years, as Cayce's health declined in Virginia Beach, he still spoke with quiet conviction about the unity of creation. Friends and followers remembered that even when he was too weak for long sessions, he would comment on the presence of animals nearby. He would remind people that the loyalty of a dog was not to be underestimated because it represented a fragment of the divine order, steadfast, patient, and unchanging. For Cayce, a dog's gaze could teach us more about ourselves than 1,000 lectures. In that gaze, we are stripped of illusions. The animal does not see our social masks, our professions, or our carefully constructed reputations. Instead, it perceives the truth we emit in the form of vibration, our anger, our kindness, our love, or our despair. And the miracle is that despite what it sees, it remains by our side. Cayce often contrasted this unconditional loyalty with human behavior. People judge, people betray, people forget. But dogs, he insisted, operate on a purer level of connection. They remind us of what it means to live aligned with love itself. And in doing so, they become spiritual companions, guiding us toward the qualities we need to cultivate if we are ever to evolve. To neglect this lesson is to miss one of the most profound teachers placed in our path. The wag of a tail, the patient waiting by the door, the silent comfort in times of grief. These are not small gestures, but messages from creation itself, telling us to pay attention to the state of our souls. So, what does your dog really see in you? According to Edgar Cayce, it sees the vibration of your being, the essence that radiates beyond words. It senses your hidden fears and your deepest hopes. It responds to your inner storms and your moments of peace, and through it all it remains loyal, reflecting back to you the possibility of love without condition. If we take Cayce's words seriously, then every encounter with our dogs is an invitation to look inward, to transform, and to align ourselves with the greater harmony of life. Because in their eyes we are reminded of the truth we so often forget, that we are spiritual beings, called to live in love. If this message touched you, take a moment now to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, has your dog ever shown you something about yourself that you didn't expect? I'll mark each comment with a heart because your stories matter and they connect us as a community. What if the life you are living right now was not only one among many, but perhaps the very last one you will ever experience on this earth? This is not a question born from fantasy or speculation. It comes directly from the documented readings of Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet. During his lifetime from the early 1900s until his death in 1945, Cayce entered more than 14,000 recorded trance sessions. In these states, he described past lives, future potentials, and the soul's eternal journey with an accuracy and depth that continues to astonish researchers even today. Among the many subjects he explored, there is one that feels especially urgent: how to know if you are approaching the end of your incarnational cycle. Could this be your last life? In one of his most impactful readings in 1932, delivered during the Great Depression, when millions were searching for hope and meaning, Cayce stated that the soul's purpose was always to grow closer to its creator. Each life, he explained, was like a classroom where we learn lessons of patience, forgiveness, and service. But eventually, a soul can reach a point where those lessons are fully integrated. At that stage, earthly incarnations may no longer be necessary. This idea was not presented as a reward or punishment, but as the natural completion of a long spiritual curriculum. And the question that has haunted seekers for generations is, what are the signs? Cayce never reduced this mystery to a checklist, but across hundreds of readings, clear patterns emerged. When studied side by side, they reveal 5 powerful signs that your soul may be approaching its final earthly incarnation. We will go through these signs in detail, not as a form of judgment, but as a mirror for reflection. and I invite you to stay with me until the end, because the last sign is perhaps the most challenging, but also the most liberating of all. Before we dive in, let me ask you a favor. If this subject resonates with you, if you feel a connection with Edgar Cayce's wisdom, or with the possibility that you've lived before, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to this channel. Most importantly, leave a comment below telling me which of these signs speaks to your soul right now. I'll be reading and marking every comment with a heart, because this community is about walking this path together. So let us begin with the first sign, which Cayce often emphasized in the context of his healing work: the integration of the spiritual and the material. In Virginia Beach, where Cayce lived, and where the Association for Research and Enlightenment still preserves his archives, he would frequently remind people that spirituality was not separate from daily life. According to his readings, a soul nearing completion no longer experiences a division between what it believes and how it behaves. There is a profound alignment. Faith is not just an idea but a lived reality. One's work, relationships, and choices reflect inner truth. Cayce once described it in a trance as, "The life lived becomes the prayer offered." In other words, the person's very existence is a testimony of harmony between spirit and matter. The second sign is the natural flowering of compassion and detachment. During a session that transformed the life of a family in New York, Cayce explained that when the soul grows in maturity, personal ambition begins to fade. Not because ambition is evil, but because it is replaced by a deeper desire to serve. In these later stages of reincarnation, people feel less compelled to accumulate wealth, recognition, or control. Instead, they find fulfillment in kindness, generosity, and alleviating the suffering of others. It is not forced. It arises naturally, like a tree bearing fruit. Such individuals often live simple lives, but their presence transforms those around them. Cayce pointed to this as evidence that the soul had learned one of the hardest lessons: selfless love. But here is where no one expected the twist. Cayce warned that compassion must be balanced with detachment. He once told a woman that her desire to rescue everyone was in fact an obstacle to her own growth, because she was confusing service with control. True compassion, according to him, is about helping when called, but also trusting God's plan when things are beyond our reach. This balance of serving and letting go is a powerful indicator of spiritual maturity, one that shows the soul may no longer need endless returns to physical life. As we move deeper, the third sign grows even more mysterious, because it touches not only your actions but your perception of reality itself. Cayce spoke often of the sense of unity, the awareness that we are all part of the same source. This was not a philosophy for him, it was a lived reality he entered in trance states. In his own words, all souls are one in him, as rivers flow into the sea. For those near their last incarnation, this is not a metaphor, but a lived perception. Such people can no longer see others as enemies or strangers. They may disagree, they may fight for justice, but at the core they sense a common spirit. Forgiveness becomes easier, prejudice loses its grip, and love is extended even to those who wound us. Cayce considered this awareness of unity one of the strongest markers that a soul was nearing the end of its earthly schooling. The fourth sign that Cayce's readings consistently pointed to is what he described as the balancing or completion of karma. During the 1930s, when people came to him from all over the United States, Hopkinsville, New York, Virginia Beach, many asked why their lives were filled with such difficulty. Cayce explained that karmic experiences are not punishments but opportunities. Each challenge, whether an illness, a broken relationship, or a financial struggle, is a chance for the soul to learn something it had not yet mastered. But he also noted that there comes a time when those karmic debts are resolved. In a reading given during the years of World War II, Cayce told a soldier's family that their son's suffering was not because of past mistakes, but because his soul had already balanced those accounts. He was living not to pay back, but to teach others courage and faith. This, Cayce emphasized, is a key signal of nearing the end of earthly incarnations. Life becomes less about repayment and more about demonstration. Instead of heavy cycles of repeating pain, the experiences begin to shift. Lessons arrive not as debts but as opportunities to express mastery. Someone in this stage might face hardship, but they walk through it with peace rather than bitterness. They no longer carry the feeling that they are chained to destiny. Cayce considered this a profound sign of soul maturity, the awareness that nothing is owed, only expressed. And yet, perhaps the most decisive sign of all, the one that Cayce repeated in different words throughout decades of trance work, is the sincere and continual seeking of the divine will above personal will. He reminded people again and again that the true measure of spiritual progress is not mystical experiences, visions, or even knowledge of past lives. It is the daily surrender to God's guidance. In Virginia Beach, during one of his most referenced sessions, he told a woman, "Not my will, but thine, O Lord, be done in me through me." For Cayce, a soul that lives by this prayer, not once but continually, is demonstrating the ultimate readiness to graduate from Earth's classroom. This fifth sign is both the simplest and the most difficult. It requires humility, trust, and the courage to release control. Those who embody it are not passive. They work, they serve, they love. But in every action, there is an inner question. Is this what God desires through me? According to Cayce, when the answer to that question becomes the compass of your life, reincarnation may no longer be necessary. The soul has learned to align its individual purpose with the eternal purpose of the Creator. Now let's pause for a moment. If you've been listening carefully, you might have recognized pieces of your own journey reflected in these signs. Maybe you've felt the pull away from ego and into service. Maybe you've noticed that your old grudges no longer have the same hold. Or perhaps you've begun asking that powerful question about God's will more often than before. This does not mean you can be certain that this is your last life. Cayce was clear that free will remains until the end. But it does mean that your soul is moving closer to that threshold. And even if you are not at the final chapter yet, every step in that direction brings more freedom, more peace, and more love into your present life. But here is what nobody expected. Cayce also gave a warning. He said that souls near the end of reincarnation face temptations unlike any before. The closer you are to graduation, the more subtle the distractions. It is not about obvious sins or crimes. It is about pride, spiritual superiority, and the temptation to believe you are finished. In one of his sessions during the post-war years, Cayce explained that the greatest danger for advanced souls was not failure, but self-deception. Believing you have arrived can block you from the very humility needed to cross the finish line. So even in this final stage, vigilance is required. This teaching is sobering and liberating at the same time. It reminds us that the signs are not trophies to collect, but mirrors to examine. They are invitations, not guarantees. Your life today, the way you treat others, the way you align with God, that is the real evidence of your progress. And Cayce's readings remain a guide not to predict an end, but to help us live fully in the present. When we step back and look at these 5 signs together, we begin to see not only individual markers, but a portrait of the soul's evolution. For Cayce, this was never abstract. Each reading was given to a real person in a real situation: an anxious mother during the Great Depression, a wounded soldier's family during the war, or a seeker who traveled to Virginia Beach in search of answers. What strikes us is how consistent the guidance was across these decades. Spiritual maturity reveals itself in alignment, compassion, unity, karmic balance, and surrender to divine will. These patterns are preserved today in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, where anyone can study the transcripts without the need for speculation. Take, for example, a reading Cayce gave in Hopkinsville, his hometown in Kentucky, where a family asked why their lives seemed to repeat the same tragedies. His answer was not about punishment, but about growth. He explained that they were still working through unresolved patterns of pride and resentment carried from earlier incarnations. But he added a hopeful note. Once those lessons are embraced and transformed, the cycle breaks. This echoes directly into the concept of the 4th sign, karmic resolution. What seems like endless repetition eventually shifts into liberation when the lesson is truly learned. For those listening right now, perhaps the most practical question is, What do I do if I recognize myself in these signs? Cayce's advice was both profound and simple. He urged people not to obsess about whether this was their last life, but to live each day as if it could be. Be faithful in the little things, he once said, and you will be ruler over much. For him, the daily act of forgiveness, the choice to serve without expecting reward, the habit of prayerful alignment, these were not small gestures. They were the very steps that brought a soul closer to completion. And here is where Cayce's message feels so relevant for us today. In a time of global uncertainty, when technology, politics, and culture pull us in conflicting directions, these 5 signs are like a compass pointing north. They remind us that the measure of our lives is not in how much we accumulate, but in how much we integrate, how deeply we love, and how sincerely we surrender. Whether or not this is your final incarnation, living with these values creates a life of meaning right now. But the mystery deepens. In several readings, Cayce suggested that souls often sense when they are near the end of their cycle. Not in dramatic visions, but in quiet intuitions, a feeling of, "I've been here before," or an unshakable peace in the face of challenges. He described these as the whispers of the soul recognizing that it no longer needs to repeat old lessons. For some, it manifests as a longing for home that no earthly place can satisfy. For others, it emerges as a clarity that material success will never define them. These subtle experiences, Cayce explained, are part of the transition toward graduation. It is worth noting that Cayce's teachings were never meant to create fear. He did not want people to worry about missing their last chance. On the contrary, his entire body of work was built on the foundation of hope. That every soul is moving forward, that no lesson is wasted, and that even if another life is needed, it will only serve to bring us closer to the source. In his words, no soul is ever lost. Each finds its way home sooner or later. This perspective changes everything. Instead of living under pressure, we live with purpose. Instead of fearing reincarnation, we embrace each moment as part of a divine curriculum. And if it happens that this is your last life, then you are already being prepared by the very experiences you are going through now. That preparation is not somewhere else, it is here, in the way you forgive, in the way you serve, in the way you open yourself to God's will. What happens after the last incarnation? Cayce was careful with this question. He suggested that the soul moves into higher realms of consciousness, where physical bodies are no longer required. Some of his descriptions pointed to dimensions of light and harmony, places where souls work not through pain, but through creative expression and communion with God. He often called this state at-one-ment, a complete awareness of unity with the Creator. For him, this was the destiny of every soul, not just the select few, but here is what no one expected. Some of Cayce's most powerful insights on the soul's final incarnation did not come in dramatic prophecies, but in ordinary consultations where people were simply searching for relief. In one session that forever changed a family's life, he told a mother that her son's mysterious illness was not a curse nor random misfortune. It was the final step of his soul working through a lingering imbalance from centuries before. Yet he added, "This is not for punishment, but for completion." That word, completion, captures the essence of the last life. It is not about escaping Earth. It is about finishing what was begun long ago with grace and with love. During the war years of the 1940s, Cayce was overwhelmed with requests. Soldiers' families, desperate for hope, came to him for answers. In more than one case, he explained that certain young men were incarnated not to settle debts, but to be examples of courage that would inspire generations. These readings highlight the shift he described. When karma is balanced, life becomes less about what you take and more about what you give. This teaching is preserved in the ARE archives, and when you read those transcripts, the words feel alive even now. One of the most arresting phrases Cayce ever uttered in trance was this: "The last life is not marked by ease, but by peace." This shocked many who assumed that reaching the end meant a life free of struggle. Instead, Cayce explained, the difference is in the soul's response. While challenges still come, the person no longer fights against them with bitterness. They carry an inner calm that cannot be shaken. Think about that for a moment. Peace in the midst of storms. Not because life became easy, but because the soul has grown beyond fear. And here's something crucial. Cayce also warned that advanced souls are often misunderstood. Their detachment can look like indifference. Their peace can be mistaken for weakness. Their surrender can appear as passivity. But in reality, these are the qualities of mastery. They are not disengaged. They are engaged in a higher way, seeing beyond appearances. If you have ever felt that others cannot understand why you live the way you do, it may not be a flaw. It may be a sign that your soul has reached a different stage of the journey. Imagine for a moment standing in Virginia Beach in the 1930s, entering the modest house where Cayce gave most of his readings. Families traveled from across the nation, often with little money, just for a chance to hear what the sleeping prophet would say. In that small room, lives were changed, and among those thousands of readings, patterns emerged that point us to these 5 signs. This is not abstract theory. It is history, documented and preserved. When we speak of the last life, we are speaking of something grounded in real moments, real people, and real words Cayce spoke under trance. Now let's turn this reflection back to you. Perhaps you recognize elements of these signs in your own life. Perhaps you feel that deep pull toward unity, or you've noticed your priorities shifting from ambition to compassion. Maybe you have begun to release grudges more easily, or you find yourself asking more often what God wants rather than what you want. If so, Cayce would say, take courage. This is not proof of your last life, but it is evidence that your soul is progressing exactly as it should. And here's the pattern interrupt that keeps many awake at night. What if you are closer than you think? What if the challenges you are facing right now are not setbacks, but the very final exams of your soul's earthly education? Seen through this lens, every difficulty becomes meaningful. Every act of love becomes eternal. Every surrender to God's will becomes a step toward home. This is what Cayce meant when he said, life is purposeful. No experience is wasted. So what does it truly mean if this is your last life? According to Edgar Cayce, it is not an escape from responsibility, but the ultimate embrace of it. A soul in its final incarnation is here not to withdraw from the world, but to shine within it. It comes not to take, but to give. It carries peace, but not passivity, humility, but not weakness, compassion, but not control. These qualities, Cayce insisted, are the real markers of maturity. And when they appear consistently, it may mean that the soul is nearing the end of its earthly journey. Cayce also spoke of what comes after. He described dimensions of light, realms of creative harmony, places where the soul participates in God's work, not through struggle but through expression. He often used the word at-one-ment, the complete awareness of being one with the Creator. Imagine a state where there are no enemies, no debts, no fear. A state where every thought is a prayer, every act an expression of divine love. For Cayce, this was the destiny of every soul. Whether it takes one more life or many, this is where we are all headed. But let us not forget his warning. The closer a soul gets to completion, the more subtle the temptations. Pride, superiority, and the illusion of being finished can become traps. This is why humility is so central to the last life. Not the false humility of denying your gifts, but the true humility of using those gifts in service, while remembering that all comes from God. Cayce made it clear. In Him, we live and move and have our being. Without that anchor, even the most advanced soul can lose direction. With it, the journey reaches its fulfillment. Think of your own path for a moment. Perhaps you are beginning to sense that material success will never satisfy you. Perhaps you feel a longing for home that no place on earth can fill. Perhaps you notice that your first instinct in conflict is no longer to fight, but to forgive. These are not small things. They are signs of transformation. They are whispers from the soul that you are moving closer to completion. And whether this is your last life or not, the way you live today shapes eternity. In the end, Cayce's message was never about fear. It was about freedom. Freedom from cycles of resentment. Freedom from the chains of pride. Freedom from the endless pursuit of things that do not last. He invited us to step into a higher way of being, where love becomes natural, service becomes joy, and surrender becomes strength. That is the real meaning of the last life, not the end, but the beginning of living fully in God. And now, I turn the question to you. Which of these 5 signs do you recognize in your own journey? Do you feel the shift from ambition to compassion? Have you tasted the peace that no circumstance can shake? Or do you feel the subtle pull towards surrender to something greater than yourself? Share your reflection in the comments below. I will be reading each one and marking them with a heart, because this is more than a video. It is a community of souls walking together. Before you go, if this message touched you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need this hope, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelation from Cayce's extraordinary legacy. Together, we will keep exploring the mysteries of the soul, the wisdom of the sleeping prophet, and the path that leads us all home.